Hi, everyone. I know that this talk is happening right after lunch, so I will try to keep the energy up and make sure that this, while it's about, I'm speaking as an anthropologist, I'll make sure it's not too dry and academic, but we'll be focusing a lot on practical tools and tips that I've been applying in a few of the organizations I work. So let's get started. Let's talk about empowering teams. Oh, wait, this was yesterday's presentation, so you've already heard about that. But what really is anthropology? Is anyone here familiar with this discipline? Yeah? Can anyone throw out their understanding of what anthropology is?
Study cultures?
Yeah, exactly. It's a lot of things, actually. So essentially, anthropology is the study of human beings, of human well-being, of the human experience. And that is a very broad field and discipline. And when some of you hear anthropologist, you might also think of some academic researcher going to spend months or even years in a culturally distinct and remotely based community to try to map out, our different cultural differences. But today, you'll actually find anthropologists embedded in all sorts of roles in organizations and tackling questions like how do we as humans interact with new technologies like AI and VR? How do we experience and perceive public services and navigate through healthcare systems? So anthropology started broad and it's getting even broader, but in many ways also more applied. And that's kind of what I wanted to talk to you today. So my preferred definition for anthropology is actually inspired in part by our purpose at Babbel, which is a leading language learning solution if you haven't heard about it or tried it yet. And Babbel's purpose is to create mutual understanding through language. And that really resonated with me because I grew up as a bilingual Swedish-American kid who early on moved to countries like Malta, Ecuador, and Jordan. And so I saw a need early on to establish more mutual understanding around the world and in different parts of life. And that is why I was drawn to the field of anthropology. I think it is really, at its core, about creating mutual understanding. And that is partly because anthropologists are curious to their core. They question many things that we take for granted in everyday life, and they're not afraid to ask why and really dig deeper into what makes us human and why do we do the things that we do in the way that we do them. And so I wanted to share a little bit about my story because you might be wondering, how did you go from being an anthropology student to ending up at an enterprise design conference? Well, like many anthropology graduates, because anthropology is rooted in many of the methods of qualitative research, I started my career as a user researcher, answering questions like, how do people access online learning in Indonesia and Brazil? Or what role does talk radio play in governance and civic engagement in Nigeria? Or why would the residents of New York City have use of the municipal open data being put out there? And while these questions were really fascinating to me, I started getting interested more into how we operate in our enterprises, even within the firm I was working in at the time, and also how our findings traveled through the structures and organizations that we shared our findings with, and really understand, questions like what constitutes best practice, and who decides what is best practice, and why? Or how do we best collaborate across functions? And why does collaboration break down sometimes? Or why do we structure our processes in this way? Or is there a better way? So a lot of these questions definitely came from my core of being a curious anthropologist, and it naturally led me to the field of operations. First, research operations, understanding how we can better take advantage of our insights in how we navigate through developing our products and services, and then to product operations, to zoom out and think, how are we working in product-centered organizations, and really thinking about linking everything together. And while this might seem like quite a big pivot, anthropology has remained something that's continuously been useful for me. And I want to share 3 aspects of this anthropological approach and mindset that I think could be helpful for all of you in your efforts in enterprise design and enterprise architecture. And so much more I've learned over the past 2 days. We're a diverse community. So first of all, I want to share this concept that insights are everywhere. So anthropologists posit that any aspect of human interaction, human behavior, even human artifacts can serve as useful insight, and depending on how you look at it and how you want to analyze it. And I want to share a story that illustrates how this perspective of insights are everywhere was valuable for me in a startup setting. So at Babbel, we wanted to establish a new product operations strategy in response to a recent organizational change. And because this organizational change happened close to the end of the year, there were some time constraints to make sure that we had established the new strategy by the start of the year. And in a time of organizational change, all of you know that a lot of things are in flux. So you can't just go around and start asking everyone, like, what is your problem? Where should product operations focus their efforts? But fortunately, this wasn't as heavy of a lift as you might expect because of this approach of insights are everywhere. So since I had joined Babbel, I had started a kind of qualitative database of internal insights. I had looked at all my one-on-one coffee chats as mini interviews. I had observed, made observations in meetings about our dynamics and our relationships. And I'd also looked at different documents and how they were interpreted and used. And I had captured that in a Miro board over the course of the past few months and started tagging them and organizing them into themes. And so when this request came through for a product operations strategy, I just went to that Miro board I had been, like playing around in for the past few months, and was able to quickly pull out some key problems to solve that helped our head of product operations develop a purpose for our product operations department in the next year that really resonated with our wider product department and company. And it is because it was grounded in the realities of the problems that everyone felt. And now I want to tell you a little bit about how you might apply this perspective of insights are everywhere. So anthropologists see themselves as participant observers. And what this means is that I, as an enterprise anthropologist, have one foot in taking an active and specific role in the community I serve, like being a product operations manager. But at the same time, I maintain some level of objective distance and constantly interrogate the jargon used or the rituals being performed or the different roles that we define. And that has really helped me, having that one foot in, one foot out mindset has really helped me identify opportunities for insight. Then, of course, thinking about that insights are everywhere might also seem, wow, you're going to end up with a lot of notes. That sounds very overwhelming to analyze. And so you might have heard from my example that I very early on started to think about how can I understand what themes I can do, how can I start tagging my insights against those themes, and where am I capturing this? I chose a Miro board, but you can choose whatever works best for you. But anthropologists will talk to no end about the best note-taking app and system for capturing insights to make analysis easier in the end. And then also, I think that insights, of course, if they're gathered over a great length of time and indefinitely, it can be very hard to know when to stop and take a deeper look. So it's helped me to introduce a quarterly cadence, a sort of insights review block on my calendar, where I go in and do a deeper review of these insights, just to make sure that I'm checking on my purpose, that it's still relevant, and also checking on what I'm hearing and making sure that my projects align still with that purpose and the needs of my community. So the second aspect of this anthropology mindset I want to share is once you have those insights, we've got to discuss them in order to understand them. And so anthropology requires a lot of self-reflection, of being aware of your assumptions and biases and checking them with a range of peers. And I want to share an example actually from the company I worked at before Babbel. It's Dashlane. It's a password management solution. And I was tasked there with understanding why product managers were not using a user feedback tool that had been rolled out several months prior. And through my initial conversations with PMs, it seemed like the problem was time management. They just didn't have time. It was overwhelming. And I thought, okay, I need to try to solve this. But then before I dove into the solution, I figured, let me pull together a cross-functional coalition that transcended product management, engineering, customer service. My former colleague, Andre, was part of that coalition to help us better understand how what is the problem here actually, and to really check that initial assumption. And we realized that the problem was not actually time management on the behalf of the PMs, but really an issue of not understanding when and how user feedback is useful to their process and their purpose. And so that really helped us reconfigure our solution to really think about how do we build better mindset and culture around using user feedback in our product teams. And that also, by going deeper and discussing with this cross-functional coalition, it enabled us to co-create a solution that solved the root problem. And so how might you want to apply this approach of discussing to understand? Well, there are many different kinds of assumptions and biases. That you might have heard about confirmation bias, sampling bias, and stereotyping. Learning about them has helped make me more aware of when I might be assuming things or coming in with a leading question, for example, and catch myself so that I can have deeper conversations that really get to that root problem. Also, central to any anthropological approach is practicing empathy, really putting myself in other people's shoes, and that has allowed me to have more meaningful conversations and really uncover what is wrong in a more well-rounded and complete way. Then also, I've learned, especially through being an ethnographic researcher, that listening is not about waiting for your turn to speak. It is very much about being guided by your curiosity and really making sure that you are asking follow-up questions and probing deeper into what that person is saying and letting the other person, lead you to new places that can often surprise me in the way that they challenge my assumptions. And the third aspect of an anthropological approach that I'd like to share is that of thinking holistically and then also acting with a holistic view of things. So I see myself as a systems thinker, and I think many in this room do actually. And I think that's also a result of my anthropology background. And to me, that really means understanding my context and not underestimating its complexity. And what has that really meant for my role in product operations? So I'll give a very recent example of my work at Babbel. I've been spending the past few months rolling out a new tool to make our team's plans and roadmaps more visible across the company and at the highest level. And this tool has had a lot of uptake, and now teams are using it to share what they're working on. But we also have a set of OKRs, objectives and key results, that demonstrate our strategy and how we're moving towards that purpose of creating mutual understanding through language. And this tool allows you to actually connect what our teams are planning with what key results we are trying to move the needle on and see a result in. But in the process of trying to introduce this feature and fill that gap, I had to reckon with the complexity of strategy implementation and really understand what is our process right now for documenting, for updating, for maintaining OKRs, and who is responsible for that at different levels, at the company and the team level, and how are those relationships built? Where is this process maybe breaking down? Where are there inconsistencies and discrepancies that I'm going to have to be involved in creating a coalition to clean up in order to make sure that we can use this collaboration tool in this way? And instead of shying away from the widening scope of what I thought would be a side task of a tool rollout, I had to engage with this complexity and really think about this solution holistically, not as a tool rollout, but as an overall future way for how our company can make sure to stay aligned in our strategy approach. And so how has anthropology helped me manage this kind of complexity? Well, anthropologists insist on never separating the subject from its context. So everything we do and think needs to be understood in the context, in the enabling environment of our human behaviors and belief systems. And it's really important, I think, to pay attention to the context, to recognize where there are interconnections and where there are dependencies. Also, anthropologists know that the meat of the matter is in understanding our relationships. So while we might draw up beautiful diagrams and organograms and charts and documents detailing our ideal system and our ideal organization, it is often in our human relationships and the reality of building those, of strengthening those, of dealing with breaks in those, that we can understand how our systems actually run and how we can make them run better. And then also, I just had to make this point as well, being interested in the study of human beings. Humans are complex, and our enterprises are not some sort of inhuman organism. And we have to recognize that as humans, we are random, we are unpredictable, and we have whole lives that transcend our titles and our departments and our responsibilities. And so approaching any kind of work holistically and thinking about my colleagues holistically beyond what they have been assigned to do has really helped me not just reckon with the messiness of this, but also sometimes surface hidden strengths or identify shifting capacities and how to leverage them. So I know that was a lot, and so I just wanted to recap a little bit for those of you who want to jot down some quick notes. So how to think like an enterprise anthropologist, according to me. First of all, I think it's important to appreciate that insights are everywhere and that you need to continuously gather and analyze them. Also, it's important to discuss your insights with others in order to more deeply understand them and check your assumptions. And then finally, it's important to think and also take actions in a holistic way because our enterprises are comprised of actual humans that live messy, complicated lives, and there's a whole web of relationships that we need to understand in order to be successful as enterprises. So what can you do next? As an operations manager, I couldn't help but throw in some action items for you. So here's what I'd like for each of you to do after you've digested all these amazing talks and workshops. I'd recommend you establish a space and a system to continuously capture your insights. Think about how you want to tag them, where you want to store your notes. Then I want you to note down any assumptions that you might find embedded in those insights you just captured. And then take those insights and discuss them with one or two people that you think will have a different perspective from yours. And then thirdly, create so one thing that I've found helpful in order to think and act more holistically is introducing the process of a kickoff meeting at the start of every change initiative or transformation journey. And this is not just to establish early alignment or make sure that everyone's informed early on. That is nice, and that is a side benefit of such a meeting, but I use those personally to get a better sense of the context that I will have to operate in with this change, and also the roles and relationships that will need to be understood and potentially strengthened to make this happen successfully. So I just want to thank you so much to all of you for being here, for making this conference and this community what it is. And with these lessons, I hope that you have a deeper appreciation for the discipline of anthropology. It's not just relegated to academia, but having maybe some relevance to enterprise design and enterprise architecture. Because as you've seen, these aspects of anthropology have really helped me define a purpose for my work that feels based in the reality of human experience and also the bound to have impact because it is based in that reality. So we now, I think, have about 12 minutes left for questions. So please ask away. And if you want to follow up one-on-one, you can find my contact information here.